Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. And today we begin with a crazy revenge story between a teacher and his student. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave comments so we know what kind of stories you love the most. The time I ruined my high school teacher's career and got her fired in the greatest way possible. This story is widely known amongst my family and constantly brought up and joked upon in my group of friends even years later. A buddy of mine suggested that this is the perfect place to make it public, so let's get into this crap storm. Backstory. I was a senior in high school at the time and had never been the brightest student. I was a solid C student and I'd never received a detention or had any kind of bad student record. This is important because to this day I still have no idea why this teacher treated me this way. The teacher, who we will name Mrs. Frank, had been a teacher there for more than a decade and was widely known for being a petty, heartless bee who the administrator saw as the golden child. Mrs. Frank taught algebra, which is my worst subject, so naturally I had issues understanding the lessons and would ask questions frequently. To some, these questions are easily answered, but to me, it was rocket science. Usually, when somebody asks a dumb question, no one should address it. However, in Mrs. Frank's case, she would belittle me in front of everyone, saying things such as, "And here comes the slow boy again. Wow, surprise, surprise, you don't understand it again. Really, we have to go extra slow for you today, don't we?" Etc., etc. I tried going to the administration about it before, but she was considered the golden child. They would sometimes send someone to examine her during class, and she would act respectfully and normal for one day, and then go back to being a little bee the next. This goes on for about half the year until I had enough. I went to the local Radio Shack, bought a recorder, and secretly recorded every insult she would throw at me. I would sometimes instigate to make up for the lost time. Go ahead, feed the fire. Fast forward to the end of the year, and I'm sitting in Mrs. Frank's class when I ask a question. Her response, and I quote, because it's burned in my brain, was, "I've been teaching here for over 10 years, and that was the single dumbest question I've ever heard come from anyone's mouth." She continued the lesson without answering. I calmly stood up, packed up my stuff, and headed to the nurse's office to dismiss myself from school. We were allowed to dismiss ourselves if we were 18. I went home, compiled all the brutal tapes into one glorious masterpiece, and headed back the next day to show the administrators. I sat down with the principal, and we listened to a couple of the insults before he stopped me. He wanted more witnesses present, as well as Mrs. Frank's. He told me we would meet the next day, where I could show him and the rest of the administrators the full tape. I walk into school the next morning, being the most nervous I've ever been for anything. I was called down to the office, where I met with some board directors, the local school police officer, the principal, the vice principal, and Mrs. Franks. What follows was some of the greatest minutes of my life. I watched as the administrators went from fed up with being in another useless meeting to furious and speechless, with some of them keeping their mouths open for the duration of the tape. I also watched Mrs. Frank go from confident and stuck up to realizing that she had effed up beyond repair. She was publicly roasting herself in front of the most important people from the district. The tape ended, and without hesitation, the administrators looked around in astonishment, and the principal turns to me and says, "I think we've heard everything we need to. Thank you." And I was quietly dismissed from the room. The final time I saw Mrs. Frank was leaving that room. I looked back and we made eye contact through her tear-filled eyes as I gave the biggest, most evil smile. I returned to class the next week, and Mrs. Frank was nowhere to be found. The story spread quickly throughout the school, and I was seen as a saint. I had successfully gotten her fired and made it almost impossible for Mrs. Frank to return to her teaching career, as well as cut off most of her connections she had with other teachers in the school. I'd ruined her financially because no school district in the area would hire this walking piece of garbage. If you're reading this, Mrs. Frank, I'd like to take a moment to tell you to go F yourself. And our next story. Never mess with a rancher and a neighbor. I grew up on a horse ranch in Colorado. We had a long piece of property, about 80 acres, and we raised Missouri foxtrotters. We lived there for almost 20 years when some folks bought a strip of property way at the back of our land. It was a strange plot of land as it was very narrow and was sandwiched between our back fence and a busy county road. We were surprised anyone would buy it, actually, as it forced the house to be pretty close to the road. Well, we never met these new neighbors until one day my dad gets notice from a lawyer telling us that after having surveyed the property lines, our back fence encroaches on their property between 3 to 6 inches, depending on the spot along the fence line. These folks had never met us, never introduced themselves. Our first introduction was this legal demand. My father was a salt-of-the-earth kind of man, very kind, but also very strong-willed. He called these folks, arranged a meet-up, and tried to talk some sense into them. First, did 3 to 6 inches really matter that much? And why had they not come to us to talk it through? He even offered a number of different compromises. These folks were hostile from the get-go. They demanded he move the fence immediately or they would sue. Apparently, the law stated that they had to put their house so far away from our fence line, and they wanted to push it back as far from the road as they could when they built it, so they wanted that 6 inches very badly. I still remember when my dad got home from the meeting, he hung his hat up and shook his head when he told my mom in his slow way, "Well, looks like we got the kind of folks for neighbors you don't ever want to have for neighbors." They sued and won, and we were forced to move the fence in 2 weeks. I say we because I was the free slave labor, as all farm kids are in the same kind of thing. All that fencing material and the time were a big cost for my family, but we got the work done in early spring. Here's where the fun comes in. When the new neighbors broke ground and built all through the end of the winter into the spring, the very next weekend after they'd moved into their house, Dad rousted me out of bed and we took the big truck into town to the lumber yard. I was extremely puzzled as we loaded up a bunch of fencing material and building supplies. We didn't have any big projects going that I knew about, and I kept asking him what it was for, but he just said, "Wait and see," with a devilish grin on his face. We built a pen in a small enclosure very near our back property line, directly behind the neighbor's new shiny house. The next day, one of our farm friends delivered a half-dozen pigs to their new home. Dad insisted on feeding these hogs table scraps and all the things that would go into the composter, as well as some good balanced hog feed to keep them healthy. Now, you may not know this, but the smell of pig excrement is directly related to what they eat in their pen. Table scraps make them smell bad, and I mean bad. I had to drive the four-wheeler back there every day to take care of them, and within a month, halfway there, my eyes would start watering. It smelled so bad. When we mucked out the pen with the bobcat, we also made the pile right next to the pen. I can't even imagine how bad the smell was living in that house. The neighbors, of course, freaked out, and again, without ever trying to talk to us, went the legal route. They lost, the area was zoned agricultural, and my dad had done his homework to make sure he was breaking no laws or regulations. The pigs were far enough from us and our other neighbors that it didn't bother anyone but the people he wanted it to bother. Come fall, when winter moved in, we sold the pigs to slaughter, and Dad stacked up a bunch of building supplies next to the pen and let the neighbors know he'd be expanding the profitable operation in the spring when they came out to scream at him. He smiled the whole time, speaking in his slow, steady way. The new neighbors sold their new house in January when the ground was frozen and the new owners would not smell the pen. Though as soon as the old neighbors were gone, we tore down the enclosure, spread the nasty stuff on the hayfield, and the new neighbors never had any bad smell come spring. They ended up being great neighbors and are still lifelong friends. Never mess with a rancher. And our last story. Steal my Amazon package? Enjoy your complaint investigation. I work from home, receive a notification on my phone that my Amazon package has been delivered. It's a couple $100 item, so I immediately go outside, but no package anywhere. I was outside as the delivery van was driving away, so literally no way a package thief snatched it in 20 seconds. The Amazon driver is 2 houses down. Excuse me, I received notification that my package was just delivered, but it's not there. Driver, looking shocked, stammering over words, what's the address? I give him the address. Yeah, I just delivered it to you. No, you didn't. I'm calling Amazon and y'all can sort this out, and I started walking away. The driver calls out, I found your package, but it says here there's an issue and I can't deliver it. It's likely a duplicate and another driver will be by later to deliver the correct one. Then why did you mark it as delivered? Because I didn't see there was an error. The other driver will be by later. No, I'm calling Amazon now. I walk away and call Amazon to report the incident. They say nothing is wrong with my package and it's marked as delivered. I tell them about the interaction and they say the driver should have given me the package. Even if it's a duplicate, the driver's not supposed to withhold a package. They'll investigate and get back to me in 24 hours. 2 minutes after getting off the phone with Amazon, the doorbell rings. I happen to be next to the door, so open it within 5 seconds and see the same delivery driver hauling butt down my driveway. He jumps in his delivery van and speeds through the neighborhood. I look down, my package is there. I call Amazon again to let them know that I just got the package, and it was the same driver who hauled tail. They said they'd be opening an investigation into the driver. I also told them about how fast he was driving through the neighborhood. I felt like a Karen calling to complain, but I truly believe this driver was running a package-stealing scam. Mark's package is delivered, customer says they never received it, driver says, well, a package thief probably stole it before you look for it. I can't imagine that delivery drivers like this would last very long. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.